I want to welcome everybody to today's presentation for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup. I'm Joy Vernon, and I'm the organizer for the meetup. Today, we're going to be looking at Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And I've got rather an unusual way of looking at it. So I'm hoping that this proves to be very thought producing for people. I've got to say, every presentation I do, particularly the astrology ones, really are weirdly informed by the quality of the planets and placements that I'm working with, which doesn't surprise me. I guess it surprises me how deeply it affects me. I was writing a series, have been, and kind of trying to continue to write a series on tarot card astrology, in which I explore each of the 36 decanic cards in the deck and their astrological correspondence. And for each one, I've waited until that planet was in that decan of that sign, and then wrote the article. And it was crazy how much the actual placement affected how I wrote. Same thing is true. Last year we did the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and I think we did Uranus square Saturn. And my Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in Aquarius. The way I presented that is totally different. There was so much research I did and so much history, and I had so many facts and figures. And now we're doing Jupiter-Neptune in Pisces, and this simply unfolded itself and revealed itself to me. I put no conscious effort into it. It just unfolded, and I was at its mercy. So we'll see how this goes. So the title of today is Drowned in Sleep, Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. And this is for the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup. So here is our agenda. I'm going to talk about Jupiter, Neptune, and Pisces and their symbolism. We're going to look at some interesting stuff that I discovered. I did not do as much research as I was originally planning on, but I came across an interesting Dane Rudyard article, and he compares the Jupiter-Neptune cycle to the Sun and Moon cycle. So we're going to look at both of those and see what he was talking about. Then I'm going to share a fairy tale with you, Sun, Moon, and Talia, which is a variation of the Sleeping Beauty, kind of predates the Sleeping Beauty story. Then we're going to talk both about the creative process and what I'm calling the gestative process. And then we're actually going to do some work with the cards. So let's go and see how it all goes. This is a little piece of philosophy for you, a little fortune. Those whom fortune favors find good luck even in their sleep. Those whom fortune favors find good luck even in their sleep. That is Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. Adrift in the waves, the breadth of the ocean, boundless, unsettled, tossing, turning, churning, or eerily still. This is Pisces. The barstool philosopher, the ale brewing friar, generous, optimistic, indulgent. This is Jupiter. The opium dreamer, the visionary mystic, lost in fog or sleep or waking dreams. This is Neptune. A light on the clouds. Jupiter, the greater benefic, brings luck wherever he sojourns. Jupiter, the largest planet, increases anything he comes near. Does Jupiter's optimism lighten the sinking weight of Neptune? Or does his largesse multiply the dreamer's phantasms? Or both? Jupiter and the Sun. Symbolically, Jupiter is similar to the sun. They're both bright and optimistic in their symbolism. Jupiter spends 1 year in each sign and takes 12 years to circle the entire zodiac, whereas the sun spends 1 month in each sign and takes 12 months to go through the zodiac. Jupiter follows the sun's apparent path through the sky, the ecliptic, more closely than any other planet. Along with Uranus and Neptune, Jupiter's composition is most like the sun's, being made of mostly hydrogen and helium. Neptune and the moon. Some astrologers consider the outer planets to work as octaves of the personal planets. According to this theory, Uranus is an octave of Mercury, Neptune of Venus, and Pluto of Mars. They share the qualities of the corresponding planet, but express it less personally and more universally. Interestingly, when I was writing this up, when I first learned that, I always heard it as, I'm sure I heard it as higher octave, and I've always considered it that way. But all of a sudden, like yesterday or the day before, I suddenly was like, wait, is it higher octave or lower octave? Because they're larger, and so it would be lower. And so then I suddenly didn't know anymore. And I think that's also a Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces, like something that I've known for years, all of a sudden was like, I have no idea which one is it. They both make sense. I don't know how to look at this. So I just left out higher or lower and just said octave. In terms of Neptune as an octave of Venus, Venus connects, it brings together. Neptune dissolves, which is the ultimate connection, is a complete dissolution and dissolving into a unified solution. So dissolving into unity is Neptune. Venus just brings together and links and connects people. Venus enjoys, Neptune binges. Venus charms, Neptune awes. However, I do find Neptune to have many lunar qualities as well. In fact, I've started in my astrology classes actually talking quite a bit about Neptune as an octave, so to speak, of the moon, just because the symbolism to me is so similar. It is dreamy, sleepy, drifting. It cycles through extremes. It veils. It lulls. The Jupiter-Neptune cycle. So Jupiter and Neptune come together once every 13 years. And so this is the beginning of their synodic cycle. They come together, then Jupiter will swing away from Neptune and swing around the entire zodiac as it does in 12 years. Meanwhile, Neptune will move ahead just a little bit into the next sign, and then Jupiter will swing back about another year later. It takes about 13 years before they connect the next time with Neptune. So their conjunctions happen in successive signs. So this conjunction this year is in Pisces. And so 13 years from now, their next conjunction will be in Aries. Likewise, their last conjunction, which I believe was 2009, was in the previous sign, Aquarius. There are two other planets who always conjoin in successive signs, the sun and moon. And this is what I read in the Dane Rudyard article. In 13 months, the sun and moon come together in every sign. Jupiter and Neptune come together in every sign over the course of 166 years. So 1856 was the last time Jupiter and Neptune came together in Pisces. And then you can subtract 166. I think you go back to, well, I know for sure you go back to 1690 and 1524. And there were some, one thing that I seem to be coming across, I did start by trying to do a little bit of historical research. It's not really my thing, and it's not a particular interest or strength of mine, but I was coming across, interestingly, a lot of like foreign exploration types of energies when I was looking at that particular conjunction in Pisces. Right, so here we have the moon conjunct sun, or the new moons. And this, I started in Pisces just because that's what our Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is. So I'm doing the new moons, moon conjunct sun from 22 to 23, starting with Pisces. And I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so that you can see this. I have the actual date on each one. So this was March 2nd, 2022. And this is that sun and moon conjunct in Pisces. And then you can see it goes into Aries and to Taurus. And we can go around the zodiac here, going into Gemini, and then Cancer, and then Leo, and then up to Virgo and Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius. And so you can see that every month it just moves to the next sign and goes all the way around the zodiac. And then it comes back to Pisces again. And so here are the Jupiter and Neptune conjunctions from 1856 to 2022. Okay, so ignore this, it still says new moons. I was just plugging the data in every time to the same document, and so I didn't change it after I had done the moons, sun moon conjunctions. But at any rate, here is our Jupiter Neptune conjunction. This was from March 17, 1856. And again, we can see it go through Pisces. Then the next one, 13 years later, was in Aries. 13 years later, Taurus. Then Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. And this, we had a blue Jupiter. We had two Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in the same zodiac sign, 0 Capricorn and then 27 Capricorn. And so that happened 1984 and then 1997 looks like. And then because we had the 2 in Capricorn, here's the last one, the Aquarius one, and now April 12th, 2022, we are back here to Pisces again. So over the course of 166 years, Jupiter and Neptune came together in every single sign, just exactly like the sun and moon come together in every sign over the course of a year. So now I started thinking about that. It's like, oh, that is very interesting, because now Jupiter is the fast moving planet that spins through the entire zodiac, while Neptune is a slow moving planet that moves ahead one sign for every cycle of its partner. And so all of a sudden, Jupiter came to take on some of those lunar qualities. It's mimicking the moon in its relationship to the sun. Jupiter swings around the zodiac now, compared to Neptune, relatively quickly, meeting up with slow-moving Neptune once every 13 years. In this analogy, Neptune is like the sun, the slow-moving planet, advancing only one sign in the time that it takes its partner to travel the entire zodiac. So the Hermetic principles. And this started as I started to explore this, and I had always considered Jupiter to be very solar in its energy and Neptune to be very lunar. And then I saw this and it's like, now Jupiter has a little bit more of a lunar quality and Neptune a little bit more of a solar quality. Well, esoteric philosophy teaches the principle of gender. And this is not sex, like the sex organs that a person has. This is simply a quality, and all people have both the masculine and the feminine qualities within them, and they express those different qualities to greater and lesser degrees. So one aspect of this doctrine is that anything that is masculine or yang externally is feminine or yin internally, and vice versa. This alternation continues through the planes. This is similar to psychoanalyst C.G. Jung's concept of the anima and the animus. And Jung's concept from a psychological point of view is that the male, and this is about sex now, the male gendered person has an internal component called the anima that is feminine, whereas a female gendered person has an internal component that is masculine, and that's called the animus. The Hermetic principle, though, is not about sex. If Jupiter and the Sun partake of masculine symbolism in their external expression, and Neptune and the Moon express as feminine, and if Jupiter becomes the moon to Neptune's sun, we see 4 layers of expression or planes of existence. These are there are various arrangements and terms for these planes. And so I do want to say that this is not the one and only way of doing this. I personally know of several, and honestly just chose one that was fourfold in nature because it fit the most easily. It also is pretty much one that I work with a lot, though. So it kind of fell into place pretty easily. So there are various arrangements and terms for these planes, but one way of looking at it is body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so we can associate body to moon, which is a traditional astrological association. The moon represents our body. The mind is the sun. And again, that's fairly traditional. The sun is symbolic of reason and logic and the kind of higher mental states. Jupiter maps up to soul according to this, and Neptune to spirit. And those seem pretty right on considering the standard symbolism that we learn. So on one hand, they alternate. Moon, Sun, Jupiter, Neptune is yin yang, yin yang. On the other, they fold back on themselves. If we take Jupiter back to its original solar correspondences and qualities, then it's yin yang, and then Jupiter as yang again, leading into yin. And so instead of going progressive layers deeper, it goes yin yang and then mirrors back yang yin. So it's like a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And Inception is available on Netflix, and I just watched it this week because that is such a good movie, and I think really relevant to this particular conjunction. And if you don't know it, it is about a group of I don't know, a group of men which is I can't describe them more distinctly, that are trying to plant an idea in someone's head using this dream technology that they've developed. And the planting an idea is called inception in the movie. And so it's how the steps that they go through, and they have to do these multiple layers of dreams in order to plant this seed. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if it's new to Netflix or all of a sudden it just started popping up this week and being recommended to me. So
is that with Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, yeah, it's got Leonardo DiCaprio, written and directed by Christopher Nolan. So sink and surface. We sink and surface through these layers each day, week, month, year, decade. Why? Let me tell you a story. Sun, Moon, and Talia. The Emperor, the Ace of Cups, the Hermit. Once upon a time, a great lord had a daughter who he named Talia. Wise men and astrologers from near and far came to cast her fortune. They discovered that she would die at the age of 15 from a splinter of flax. The Lord banned all flax from his household. Page of Staffs, the Wheel of Fortune, Death. When Talia was 15, she saw an old woman in the street spinning with a spindle and distaff. Having never seen such a thing, she invited the woman to come up to the house and demonstrate her craft. Talia demanded to turn the whirling spindle herself. A splinter of flax pierced her finger under the nail, and she fell down as if dead. King of Pentacles, 6 of Cups, 9 of Staffs. The Lord was inconsolable. He could not bring himself to bury his beautiful daughter, so he ensconced her in one of his mansions far out in the country. Wanting to sink into forgetfulness, he closed the doors and abandoned forever the house where he had suffered this great loss. Knight of Swords, 9 of Cups, 2 of Cups. One day the king was out hunting. One of his falcons flew into the window of a house. His men knocked and called, but could not rouse anyone. The king ordered a vintner's ladder to be brought. He climbed up and entered the house. Looking around, he found no one. At last he came upon Talia upon her velvet throne. He tried in vain to wake her. Overcome by her beauty, he carried her to the bedchamber and made love to her. The Empress, the Sun, 3 of Cups. 9 months later, Talia gave birth to twins. One as bright as day and one as dark as night. Trying to nurse, one of the children sucked on her finger and sucked the splinter right out. Talia woke immediately. She held her children to her breast and nursed them, all the while wondering how she had gotten to be in such a situation. Knight of Cups, the Lovers, 10 of Cups. The king returned to Talia. He was overjoyed to discover her and her 2 beautiful cherubs. He related to her everything that had happened, and they bonded in friendship. He left saying that he would return soon. Queen of Swords, the Devil, 5 of Pentacles. Meanwhile, the king's wife suspected that something was going on. Pretending to be the king, she sent word to Talia, telling her it was safe to come to the castle, and that he wanted to see the children. Talia arrived with her babes only to discover the vengeful queen. The queen took the children and planned to feed them to the king. The Magician, Hanged Man, the Moon. Luckily, the good-hearted cook hid the children with his wife to save them. He cooked a pair of lambs in their place. The queen again tricked Talia into coming to the castle. This time the queen confronted her, bitterly berating her for ruining her marriage. Talia claimed no wrongdoing for her part, as she was drowned in sleep when it all unfolded. The Tower, Knight of Staffs, 10 of Pentacles. The queen had her servants build a fire to roast Talia in. Talia, trying to delay, asked to remove her clothes. The greedy queen wanted the richly embroidered gowns and agreed. As she removed each garment, Talia let out a piercing scream. The king heard her and returned at once. They threw the evil queen into the fire. Then the cook showed them where he had hidden their children, sun and moon. At last, they all lived happily ever after. Speaking in symbols. These are the basic elements of the Sleeping Beauty story. There's the birth of the girl. There's a prediction or curse in the Charles Perrault and the Grimm brothers story, a fairy fairies, the fairies of the kingdom are invited except for one who is slighted, and that one curses the child. In this version, there was the astrologers predicted that she would die. There's a spindle in all the versions. There's falling asleep in all the versions. Isolation in a protected environment in all the versions. And of course, in the Sleeping Beauty, in the La Belle au Bois Dormant, which I believe is the woods that are sleeping, not the beauty. But Sleeping Beauty, and in Briar Rose, which is the Grimm version, around the castle grows up, in Charles Perrault, he says, grows up trees, bushes, and briars. And the Grimm brothers just describe briars growing up all around the castle, so thick that no one can get through. And in the Grimm brothers, many princes die trying to get through the briars. So isolation in a protected environment. The efforts of the prince to reach her while she sleeps, and then waking in the Sun, Moon, and Talia, waking with 2 children, and even in the other versions, waking and discovering that there is, a man, and she marries him that night, and they soon have children thereafter. Then there's another section that the Grimm brothers kind of stops there, which seems like the end, but both Charles Perrault and the older Italian version, there's this additional component where there's this threat from the outer. In the version we just heard, it's the king's wife who's going to cook the children and feed them to her husband. And in the Perrault version, the prince's mother is part ogre and tries really hard to restrain herself from eating children, and succumbs and requests that the children be cooked for her. And so there's that little thing that has to be dealt with. So here's our symbol dictionary. The baby girl represents the feminine. The prediction indicates fate, perhaps what you must experience and can't avoid. The spindle is creation, and that is a common symbol that's used in creation myths, particularly the turning of the constellations around the North Star, or the turning of the whole heavens around the North Star. That's conceived of as a spindle, and is the creative force that continually creates our universe. Sleep is the inner realms, the subconscious, the psychic planes. Isolation on a psychological level is self-reliance. Also, it's the alembic of alchemy in which transformation takes place. It's the womb of creation. The prince, of course, is the masculine energy. Remember, everybody has both the feminine and masculine within them. They're only separated out here in order to use them as symbols. And so then marriage, of course, is the integration of the feminine and the masculine. The threat from the outer is, I believe, the ancient feminine, and I don't want to go a lot into trying to describe what I mean by that, but it is that kind of prehistoric undercurrent of power that is very, I don't necessarily want to say destructive, because it's equally creative and destructive with disregard for the faster cycles of human life or of cultures or whatever. It's an ancient, slow energy that creates and destroys just as needed. As I started to put this together, I was like, wait a second, there's eight of these, and that would map onto the lunar phases, and that would be really interesting. I think the isolation ends up mapping onto the full moon, the prince as the disseminating moon, Marriage is the last, to start in the middle. I don't know why I started in the middle. Marriage is the last quarter, and the threat from the outer is the balsamic. Anyway, you could go somewhere with that, I think, but we're not going to today. It just kind of occurred to me at the last minute. Sink and surface. So coming back, we talked about body, mind, soul, and spirit. Moon, sun, Jupiter, Neptune. The princess, the spindle, the child, the marriage. And symbolically, that represents the feminine, her creative power, her creations, and her ultimate integration into wholeness. Why do we sink and surface through these layers? We surf the planes of existence in order to create. Sleep is gestation, or the part of the creative process that happens beyond our control. And so here are the tarot cards for that. The moon card is Pisces, and I'm using the standard Golden Dawn attributions for the cards. The high priestess is the moon. The sun is the sun. The wheel of fortune is Jupiter, and the hanged man is Neptune. And so, so we have this connection, this sun and moon and their cycles, and this Jupiter and Neptune and their cycles, and all within this realm of the sign of Pisces. So the creative process, body, mind, soul, spirit, the high priestess, the moon as body, the mind, the sun card as the sun and mind, the wheel of fortune as Jupiter, soul, and the hanged man as Neptune, spirit. And this is the sequence of going yin to yang to yin to yang. The gestative process. And this is that cycle reversed. Here we have the high priestess on the right-hand side, and then the sun and the wheel and the hanged man, or moon, sun, Jupiter, Neptune. And the gestative process is an inverted process. And it is the sleeping princess who is drowned in sleep, the spinning spindle of creation, the resulting child, and of course the spindle is and pricking a finger, anything piercing, drawing blood, all of those are very masculine symbols. So the spindle, very masculine in its symbology, and that would be representation of sex, plain and simple. So the princess drowned in sleep, the spindle, which is the sex that is out of her control, the resulting created object from that, which is the child, and then the final marriage, which is the blending of the solar and lunar principles and currents. And that's of course indicated by the pillars behind the high priestess. So just to explain this a little bit more, the creative process is a process that we use to create. And it is also corresponds to how we connect with the divine. And it's based on the Kabbalistic four worlds. And I don't want to teach all of that right now. Maybe in fact, probably I will end up doing something on that this year, but I don't want to go into it now. But this is our process of producing something. It's also our process for connecting with the divine. And so we start at the physical level, go through the mental, the soul level, or I call it the purity of emotion level, and up to spirit. Whereas the gestative process is an inverted process of spirit coming down and acting upon us. And that's the symbolism that she is impregnated while asleep. The impregnation is through spirit, and it's the same in the Bible with the Annunciation of Gabriel to Mary, announcing that she's going to be with child. And that is the princess, then the spindle, then the child, then the marriage. So what will you create with the moon and sun cycle? And this is one of the things I kind of alluded to earlier and wanted to talk about a little bit more here, is that just as the moon and sun go through a year in those successive signs, and they have their phases, the moon goes through those 8 phases, or at the very least, the 4 phases of first quarter, full, last quarter, and new. Jupiter and Neptune do exactly the same thing. I mean, all planets do in relationship to another planet, but it is in the successive signs when it's Jupiter and Neptune and when it's the sun and moon. And so Jupiter conjoins Neptune as it does now. It'll swing out to a first quarter, then to a kind of full moon position in opposition. So what will you create with the moon and sun cycle? What will you create with the Jupiter and Neptune cycle? And with the moon and sun cycle, we always think about it in a monthly cycle, particularly the 2 weeks between new moon and full moon, as a creative process and coming into a culmination or realization of something at the full moon. And you can do the same thing with the Jupiter and Neptune cycle and follow Jupiter over whatever it's going to be, 6.5 years, until you get to the full Jupiter cycle, Jupiter-Neptune opposition that to be totally honest, I did not look it up. So I don't know if it is a Pisces Virgo or if Neptune's moved ahead by then and it's an Aries Libra. So I will have to look that up. And that's all the slides I have. I want to do I want to take some questions, and then I want to do some card work. And I want to kind of discuss kind of some of the ideas. This was very, in many ways, very much an outline. I could go into any one of those things in a great deal of detail, which I didn't want to do, but I thought if we field some questions, maybe it'll give me a chance to expand on any points that are of interest. So thank you for attending Jupiter Conjunct Neptune. You can visit my website at joyvernon.com for more information, classes, or to schedule a reading. You can stop by my blog, completelyjoyous.com, or of course, just joyvernon.com and click on blog. Follow all of our great events at the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup, and you can subscribe to Joy Vernon Astrology Tarot Reiki on YouTube. My thanks and much gratitude. Donations, if you are so inclined. This is not required in any way, shape, or form. Some people ask. Donations can be sent via PayPal to joy@joyvernon.com. And that's me. Somebody did mention this energy and the kind of the collective right now. And I think that there are, you know, I poked my nose into a couple different articles I didn't read in their entirety. I poked my nose into one article that was like, oh yeah, there'll be a lot of blockbusters made this year. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. So I don't really I tend to totally agree with things like that, but it's not necessarily the way that I necessarily think about things. And I don't have any predictions or anything like that. Other planetary placements, I frequently do have lots of predictions. I don't with this one. One of the things that to me was very relevant is that I remember back when the phrase alternative facts came into vogue, And just the whole idea of, it just seemed like that year, the idea of being able to trust the news and trust what people were saying to you just fell apart. And that was when, I believe, I looked it up at one point, I don't ever remember. I believe that was the year that Jupiter moved through its trine to Neptune. Jupiter was in Scorpio. I think Saturn was also square to Neptune at the time. And so just this idea of starting to move towards this, you can't trust what you read, you can't trust what people tell you, you can't trust what you see on Facebook, you know, the whole Russia-Ukraine thing and the propaganda that Russia's putting out. You know, from our point of view, we're like, oh my God, that's horrible. But just look at all the propaganda we have here. Anywhere, and not just our government telling us things that aren't true, but just all of us believing things that we haven't really been able, that we don't know, that we just know everybody else says. I think that is a lot of the Jupiter and Neptune energy. And one of the great things, I might have said this in the write-up for the presentation today, is that when we can't trust what we hear, when we don't have all the facts, or we're not capable, we're not able, for whatever reason, to verify what we've learned or heard, we have to go in and trust our intuition. And that is a very scary proponent. There's a reason why science is science, but there's also a reason why people have intuition, why it's inborn within us. And it's very scary to step off the, I don't know if I can trust this fact, and I'm going to have to follow my own intuition. I mean, you know, I had a doctor's appointment the other day, and I was just kind of like, my intuition says this. And she just was like, she's a doctor, I don't blame her. She's just kind of like, well, you can't always read everything you read. You can't always believe everything you read online. I'm like, I'm not believing it. I'm following my intuition, but you're not going to understand that. And that's totally okay, because you're a doctor and I'm a psychic. So that's your strength versus my strength. You know, there is that potential for really deeply connecting with that ability and for opening it up. But remember that as it opens, it can be overwhelming. It can be distortion. It can be the veil of the moon. And people that have initial psychic experiences, or that are new to psychic experiences or following their intuition, frequently get it wrong, which is why it's usually advised to follow your logic. You know, from general, not in any circle I hang out in, but the general advice is usually to follow your logic. And so kind of familiarizing yourself with the intuitive process, double checking it, learning how to double check it, learning how to verify your own intuition, so that you know what is going to be true for you and useful for you. Those are all parts of this cycle.
Hi, I'm looking at your slide from the Jupiter-Neptune cycle going back to 1856.
Okay.
The last time Jupiter and Neptune came together in Pisces. And you know, it's always like a kind of the basic approach here. Well, what were the macro trends, or what kind of macro trends you might be able to identify with 1856, with which you could find a parallel for us today in the next 12 years, beginning with this new Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Pisces?
You know, and that is totally the accepted way of doing it. And I did start to do some research to that effect. And like I said, I got totally dragged. Like, the presentation had other plans for me and took me away from that. There was a lot of stuff leading up to the Civil War at that time in the United States. Interestingly, the previous cycles were 1690 and 1524. And I had searched the date 1524 world events or something like that. And it was a French, the start of a French exploration of the New World. And curiously, I actually brought up something that said 1524 to 1690, 1524 being a Jupiter-Neptune and Pisces conjunction, and 1690 being a Jupiter-Neptune and Pisces conjunction. And it was a map of all the sites that the French had founded, all the cities they had founded in the New World during those two very interesting dates. I don't think that there was anything remotely related to astrology in that. I think it was literally just a map of the height of the French exploration. It seemed like a lot of because the French had owned like the whole Louisiana area, and then that Louisiana Purchase and all of that stuff, they'd owned quite a lot of land and then sold it. It seemed like there were forays into something that then like didn't work or backed out or dissolved. That was kind of where I was going, Tom, with some of that.
And that makes total sense, like if thinking about the French exploring in Canada, because they did like make inroads into places, but it would kind of fizzle out. And that was during the fur trade a lot, that was in the 18 something or others. So that might have been like 1856.
This is what I was thinking about doing for some card work. I thought we could really explore any one of these as positions for a tarot reading. So body, mind, soul, spirit, Moon, Sun, Jupiter, Neptune, Princess, Spindle, Child, Marriage, Feminine, Creative Power, Creations, Integration. I thought any one of those could be a 4-card spread. I mentioned the movie Inception. And so the idea of planting a seed. That's actually that's a process of manifestation that we do. It's an esoteric process. People like Paul Foster Case in particular, he's very much talks frequently about instilling ideas into our subconscious so that they manifest. It's basically setting an intention or an affirmation. And so the idea of planting a seed that can grow, and we're used to doing it with the shorter cycles, like I mentioned, the lunar cycle, maybe a 2-week new moon to full moon type of planting a seed and getting the flower type of cycle. But with Jupiter and Neptune, it's going to be much slower. It might be interesting. That might be another spread too, might be just like, what is my goal for the Jupiter Neptune cycle, like 6.5 years, the Jupiter full Jupiter, so to speak, Jupiter Neptune opposition. What is my intention to achieve for that? And then what can I do within a smaller, like the Jupiter first quarter, what can I do, and break it down and start to add some sun and moon, like what can I plan over the course of a year, what can I plan over the course of a month, what can I plan over the course of 2 weeks, and something like that. If you've got like a big project that you're wanting to, like, at the end of 6.5 years, I want to have achieved this, how could we break that down into some smaller cycles? So that's another kind of tarot variation that I had in mind. Sorry, I don't have like, here is a spread for you all to do. I don't work that way. I'm like, oh, I got a bunch of ideas. What do you like? What do you want to play with? Because this is about creativity, I would say that probably if you're going to ask a question, it would be more about the type of question of what can I create, or what does this cycle tell me about something I'm working on, something like that.